Hey everybody, Dan Warmby with Keller Williams, West Ventura County here. Hope everybody's doing great. So Election Day has finally come and gone, and we're waiting on some of the bigger issues to get resolved. But a lot of our local ballot initiatives are a lot clearer at this point. So let's take a look at what passed and what didn't. First up, Measure G, the marijuana business tax, which authorized a 3% tax on marijuana businesses, passed easily with 70% of the vote. Measure G would hopefully generate about $1.6 million a year for city services. It also lets Ojai increase the tax up to 10%, so that should bring in quite a bit more revenue for Ojai. Next up is, as of late last night, it looks like Measure K, the Ojai Unified School District bond issue, had about 61% of the vote, and it only needed 55, so it looks like that's on track to pass. That will authorize a bond issue for $2.3 million for Ojai Unified Schools. It's paid for by a new property tax of $27 per $100,000 in assessed value. Measure E, the sales tax in Oxnard, looks like it's going to pass as well. As of this morning, it had 53% of the vote. That will authorize an additional sales tax of 1.5%, and that should generate about $40 million a year, mostly aimed at funding emergency services. So it looks like the total sales tax rate in Oxnard would be up from 7.75% to 9.25%. Next up, Measure F looks pretty close to passing as well. With 49% of the vote so far, Measure F authorizes an expedited development permit process for projects that meet specific requirements or are filed by specific types of professionals. So it should make development in Oxnard a little bit easier. Measure L isn't looking as good with only 38% of the vote so far. This one authorizes an increase of power to the city treasurer that cannot be reduced by the city council. It also reduces oversight authority to the city manager and the finance director, and grants authority to the city treasurer over the city's budget as well as the investment portfolio, the finance department, and the municipal budget preparation. It looks like people are voting pretty strongly against that. Measure M has 56% of the vote so far. A yes on M would establish meeting procedures for city legislative bodies to follow, like pre-recorded staff presentations, Robert's Rules of Order, guidebooks and training on meeting procedures, etc. Measure N has a very narrow lead so far at 50.76% of the vote. Measure N would encourage Oxnard to pave its streets and alleys to a certain level or risk losing a pretty significant amount of sales tax income. More marijuana taxes in the form of Measure I passed pretty easily again. Voters okayed a tax on marijuana businesses of 8% of gross receipts for retail businesses, 4% for other marijuana businesses, and $10 a square foot for cultivation. Measure J, which supports amending Ventura's city charter to create a little more flexibility in how the public works projects get completed, looks like it's going to pass pretty easily at 74.2% of the vote so far. A lot of marijuana issues were decided in this election, with Measure O passing with 57% of the vote. Measure O authorizes marijuana cultivation and distribution with limitations of 500 acres of cultivation for general marijuana and 100 acres for indoor nurseries, permits for sales between distributors, and a tax of 4% of gross receipts on general cultivation and 1% of receipts on nursery cultivation. Lastly, Measure H. It looks like it's going to pass pretty easily with 73.4% of the vote so far. Measure H supports an existing $59 parcel tax for 4 more years. That's going to bring in about $2.2 million a year for the Ventura Unified School District. A lot is still somewhat up in the air, but it looks like we have a pretty clear picture of what's likely to pass at this point. So I hope all that helps. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more West Ventura County content. Have a great rest of your week, everybody.